So I'm the convener of the UNEG Ethics Working Group. I'm invited today on accountability.
Now, I'm assuming that we are in the round of introductions since Gabi was breaking up a bit. But hello, everybody from my side. My name is Simon Petikoff. I'm working with the Independent Evaluation Unit of ITC, and I've been working on the integrity principle in the guidelines.
Thanks, Simon. Decca, we got you here. Hi, everyone. We seem to have a bit of a sound issue of voices going in and out.
Sorry.
But Decca, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Decca Musa. I work with the UNDP Evaluation Office, and I will be talking to you on the respect principle. Over.
Hello, colleagues. My name is Tina Torjman-Nebe. I also work at the UNDP Independent Evaluation Office, and I was formerly at UNICEF Evaluation Office, and I was co-chairing this working group with Gabi for the last 2 years. And today I'll be talking about beneficence.
Great, thank you. And Gab, have we got you with us?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Okay, I'm Gabrielle Berman. I'm the Senior Advisor for Ethics in Evidence Generation for UNICEF, and I was responsible for doing the background paper to the UNEG ethical guidelines. Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. How wonderful. We're 60 participants, so the numbers are going up every half second. So how wonderful that there is this kind of enthusiasm for ethics. So my name's Leslie. I'm an independent facilitator. Ethics is my passion. I've been working with the authors over the last few months, supporting them to put together this really quite exciting and forward-looking package, the 2020 UNEG ethical guidelines for evaluation. So great to have you with us. Before we start, if we can move to the next slide, we're just going to do a little bit of tech stuff. So maybe many of you are sick to death of Zoom, you're all Zoom experts, but for those of you who aren't, we're going to be using a tool called Annotate. So I'm just going to walk you through how you can do Annotate. So the instructions on the screen, but if I walk you through it, you need to take your mouse and you need to take it up to the top of your screen, and you'll see a green box saying you are viewing WFP evaluation screen. To the right of that, there's a box that says View Options. If you click on View Options and scroll down, you will see Annotate. So far, so good. So then you go into Annotate and you'll see a toolbar, and towards the left of that, you'll see something called Stamp. Now, if you click on Stamp, why don't you all practice it? Click on Stamp. I'm going to choose a heart. And I'm going to stamp on the screen. There, you can see my heart. Why doesn't everybody give it a go? See if you can find it. So we should have 70 plus. Wonderful. Great. You're all dab hands. Excellent. All right. For those of you who are new, who've just arrived, we're practicing the Annotate function. Top right, top of your screen. Scroll down to Annotate, find a stamp. Brilliant. Okay. And we've got Rafaela here today helping us with the tech. So in a second, Rafael, I'll ask you to just clear the screen. Yeah, still got people practicing. Loving all these hearts. Great. So let's find out where these hearts are coming from. So this quick little activity, because sometimes we can feel a bit isolated in this world of Zoom. So if everybody would like to take a stamp and stamp on this world map so we know where we're all coming in from. So I'm coming in from the UK. I will do my little star on the UK. Great. Wow. Gosh, lots of us in Europe, South America, Asia, North America. Have we got somebody in Greenland, Iceland? Wonderful. Great. No one in Australia today, although I know we have at least one Australian present. Okay, fabulous. That's really lovely to get a sense of where we all are spread out across the world, interested in thinking about ethics in evaluation. Great, Rafaela, if you can just clear that screen and we'll go to the next activity. So the next one, before we start talking ourselves, we want to just situate ourselves as a group of people. We know where we are physically, but where are we now when it comes to thinking about ethics? So we've got 4 questions for you. So the first one is, why did you want to attend this event? Please select all that apply. So the first one, I find ethical dilemmas quite tricky. I want to know more. Second answer, I want to understand what the new guidelines consist of to help me apply them better. I want to network. My boss made me. And obviously you'll have many other reasons for coming, but let's just get a sense of who we are here in this space. So we'll just give the poll a minute to give everybody a chance to answer. Each of the 67 of us. Okay, Rafaela, let's see the results. Okay, so 87% of us want to understand what the new guidelines consist of. Brilliant, to help you apply them better. So we're definitely all in the right room. I find ethical dilemmas quite tricky. Yeah, welcome to the club. Ethical dilemmas are really tricky. That's why they're called dilemmas, isn't it, really? Somebody whose boss made them, well, hopefully by the end of this session, you will be wanting to run ethics session in your organization, and no one will be needing to make you do anything. Excellent. Let's have question number 2, Rafaela. How relevant are ethics to the day-to-day work that you are involved in? Low relevance, medium relevance, high relevance. So those of you who are joining us, we're just doing a poll, so feel free to click your answer into this poll. We'll be closing it in about 15 seconds. How relevant are ethics to the day-to-day work that you're involved in? Low, medium, or high? Rafaela, let's see the results. Okay, high relevance to 68% of you. This is great. This is music to my ears, because I've done numerous bits of research on ethics, and quite often it's surprising that not everybody thinks ethics are relevant to their work. So we've obviously got an audience who are quite clear about the relevance. Brilliant. Question number 3. Have you seen the new UNEG ethical guidelines for evaluation? So they're more than new anymore. Let's start calling them the 2020 UNEG ethical guidelines. They were launched at the AGM, so hopefully you might have had a chance to see them. So if you could just answer yes or no, that'll help us get a sense of who you are in the room as well. Okay, Rafaela, do you want to tell us the results? Okay, so 45% of you have seen them and 55% of you haven't. Okay, that's a great balance. That's really good to know. Great, thank you. Excellent. Last question. How challenging has it been to maintain ethical evaluation practice during COVID? Less challenging than normal, same level of challenging, more challenging? Okay, Rafaela, what have we got? Less challenging for a lucky one, and some challenging and more challenging for most of us. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that little poll. Hopefully we can all get a sense of each other and some of the challenges we're facing, etc. Right, so now we're going to tell you a little bit more about the principles that we've developed in these guidelines. Each of the authors is going to take you through their session with a small interactive activity. We're going to start with integrity, so I'm going to pass you over to the integrity author, which is Simon. Over to you, Simon.
Actually, I believe not yet. I think we still go a bit through the
You're
timeline,
right? The timeline. Thank you. I'm rushing ahead. Going to hand you over to Tina first, actually, to talk us through how we developed the guidelines, and then Gabby will talk us a little bit through some of the learning we got from the innovative process we took.
Thanks, Leslie. So, colleagues, the ethics working group was actually initially created as a task force in 2017, and it started working in 2018. And in that first year, we published a mapping and review paper on evaluation ethics, which looked at how we as a UNEG community were using the 2008 guidelines, and also looked at what comparator organizations were doing in the field of evaluation ethics. And then from there, we went into developing the current 2020 ethical guidelines. And one highlight there really was the January 2020 Writers' Retreat, which Leslie facilitated, and where the 4 of us came together, also with the help of Gab, who hosted us actually in beautiful Florence, Italy. After that, in April this year, the draft ethical guidelines were shared with UNEG heads for comment, and were then subsequently approved at the AGM in June. I should mention that the AGM also indicated that the ethical guidelines and pledge of conduct should be periodically updated. So there's scope for improving on the work that has been done so far.
Thank you, Tina.
And perhaps then just to complement, I hope you can hear me now. Please say yes.
Yes.
We thought it might be helpful to share with you some just a few points of learning that we've gained from this process, as I think many of us in the UNEG community are involved in producing guidelines, papers, and so forth. So I think a few things that worked well for us as a group. We started off as a very small working group with just 3 and then 4 agencies. And we commissioned the mapping and review to get a sense of what was good ethical practice in the bigger world beyond the UN. And then once we had decided to embark on the work and taken full ownership of it as a working group, we had decided to author the revised guidelines ourselves. And use the UNEG funding, which was graciously given to us, to bring in external expertise to guide us and keep us on track as a group. And that was indeed Leslie who took on that sorry task. We then expanded the working group. We did because we realized we needed to have the perspectives of a different range of mandates within the UN system. And we divided ourselves up. So we had the core writers group, and the presenters here indeed are that group. But other members also worked very hard to conduct a peer review of the pieces that we were drafting and writing and revising. And we took some time out, as Tina said, in Florence, dedicated time to do that, because of course we're all very busy and this is always an add-on for many of us. The other thing I wanted to mention was the use of ethics champions. We managed to secure a little bit of time of 3 quite prominent external experts, some in the UN, some outside of the UN, who were really there as a check and balance, and really to get that extra objective eye on the work that we're producing to make sure it was sound and given credibility. So I think those were a few things that we felt worked very well. What we also think has worked well, but we can't confirm that yet, is that we've come up with a very nice new design for the guidelines, and I think they'll be launched in the coming days. So hopefully you'll have a chance to see them and agree with that also piece of learning. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Gabby. And obviously, if you have questions about the process, feel free to put them in chat and we can answer them at the end. So in terms of process, we're going to go through each of the 4 principles, have an interactive exercise. We won't be opening for plenary questions after each principle. So hold your thoughts, put them in chat, we'll compile them, and we'll have 15 minutes at the end to have those questions. So let's start with integrity. This isn't one that we see all the time. It's something that might be implicit, but having it up front and center was a process we went through, and Simon's going to walk us through that. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Leslie. Now that's me. Allow me to present to you the principle of integrity. As you have already learned, there are 4 principles in the 2020 ethical guidelines for evaluation, and integrity is the first principle. Now you might wonder, why is that? Why do the guidelines start with integrity? Well, we would actually like to explore with you the answer to that question. And to do that, we invite you to please take a moment to reflect on the question, what is integrity about? What does integrity mean to you? You are most welcome to share your thoughts directly here in the chat. If you think about integrity, what do you have in mind? What do you think of? So there's the first reactions coming in, that integrity can be about truthfulness. Any other thoughts from the audience? So transparency, honest and moral principles, about doing the right thing when things get rough. Ooh, now we get a lot. Honesty, contestability, being true to principles, objectivity. Somebody saying integrity means an individual who does what he promises, reliability and trustworthiness, doing the right thing. Thanks so much for all these ideas. As you can see, there's already a feeling around, what is integrity about? Neutrality, consistent application of rules and standard to everyone. Thanks very much. That is already a good round of reflections together started. Maybe let's go one step further and have a look at what you find when you look online, for example, just getting a bit different perspectives. Here are some quotes you can find when you search for integrity with a random search engine online. The first one on the left, for example, says, for example, integrity is choosing your thoughts and actions based on values rather than personal gains. So it's definitely something about values, even though it doesn't specify which ones. Or in the middle, integrity is doing the right thing even if nobody's watching. So integrity doesn't need anybody else, apparently. It's not necessarily about interaction. It's something that we have in ourselves. On the right, the choice between what's convenient and what's right. So as some also already said in their comments, it is about making an effort for what you believe in, to uphold values, even if it's maybe not the easiest course of action, or when it gets rough, as somebody put it. Now, let's have a look at the role that integrity plays in evaluation. There's a document that we all know well, where you can find a lot of references actually to integrity, and that's the UNEG norms and standards for evaluation. So to start with, integrity is mentioned right at the start of norm 6, ethics, where it says evaluation must be conducted with the highest standard of integrity. So integrity is the first quality actually mentioned here under ethics. Integrity is also featured in norm 10, professionalism, which reads that evaluations should be conducted with professionalism and integrity. Then there are also clear linkages with impartiality and independence. For example, norm 5 on impartiality says that key elements of impartiality are objectivity, which we also saw in the comments, professional integrity, and absence of bias. And impartiality, on the other hand, is connected with independence. So what does this tell us? Actually, going through these references to integrity gives us already an idea that, first of all, integrity plays a central role in ethics for evaluation, and moreover, that it has a strong connection and relationships to other important qualities. And this now brings us to the definition of the principle of integrity as it is now captured in the 2020 ethical guidelines for evaluation. So integrity is the active adherence to moral values and professional standards, which are essential for responsible evaluation practice. Integrity in evaluation requires honesty and truthfulness, and that applies both to communication and to actions. Then professionalism, which consists of qualities such as competence, commitment, ongoing reflective practice, or credible and trustworthy behavior. And finally, integrity also requires independence, impartiality, and incorruptibility. These are interdependent and mutually reinforcing. They mitigate or prevent conflicts of interest, bias, or undue influence, and which may otherwise compromise responsible and professional evaluation practice. So thinking back to the question we started with, we asked, why do the guidelines start with integrity? Why is integrity the first principle? Well, as all these perspectives we looked at now showed, integrity is something like a prerequisite, a foundation, a backbone, something in our core. There may be many guidelines or behavior or norms or standards that we may commit ourselves to, but it is actually integrity that requires us to make sure that we mean it, that we actually do what we say. And that's why it is put as the first principle of the 2020 ethical guidelines for evaluation. And that's when I hand over.
Great, thank you, Simon. It's such a rich area, isn't it, integrity? As you can imagine, we spent months talking about it. So if anyone has any questions of clarification or more deep questions around substance and content, please put them in the chat. I'll be compiling them and we can come to some of them, if not all of them, on the day. So let's see how it goes. So now we're going to move into another interesting, well, fascinating one. They all are, aren't they? Accountability. So I'm going to hand you over to Gabby, our author for accountability.
Yes, thank you very much, Tina. I think accountability is the second principle because partly it's not terribly new to most of us. And I think certainly in oversight functions and evaluation, accountability is quite a familiar notion. However, we did felt that it required some nuancing and some attention when it comes to looking at accountability with an ethical lens. And we had quite a debate about how to fit it into the guidelines, but we did ultimately decide upon a definition which we feel covers the broader sense of accountability in our field. Accountability is essentially the obligation to be answerable, and to who? To be answerable to a range of stakeholders, including affected people, for all decisions that are made and actions taken by all those who are involved in the design, in the conduct, commissioning, and organisation of evaluations. It's also about being responsible for honouring commitments that are made, whether they're financial commitments or moral commitments, and so forth, without qualification or exception. And importantly, it's about reporting, and I think this will link now later on to Tina's session on beneficence. It's about reporting harm that is observed during the evaluation process at any point, or even identifying potential harms and risks to anybody who's involved in the evaluation, and making sure that from the outset appropriate channels are known and identified to manage those issues, regardless of whether they come up within the immediate scope of the evaluation, but if they arise within the process of the evaluation itself. Go to the next slide. So what does this actually require? What are we expecting in terms of behaviour from the commissioners and the organisationers and the evaluators themselves and evaluation managers? Well, I mean, we're looking certainly for transparency. This, I think, is already outlined in the norms and standards that Simon referred to. I think it's norm 7 that talks about transparency, which entails establishing trust and increasing answerability. Answerability, you know, on performance to the public, to the donors, but also to the people who we engage in the evaluation process, including the communities who often give their time to be part of our evaluations. It requires responsiveness as questions, issues, or particular events arise, And this relates to adaptability, which I think is a very important topic right now, and given the climate in which we are conducting evaluations in COVID. I mean, COVID is not the first crisis, but it is certainly a very challenging one. And I think there's a lot of wealth of knowledge and learning arising and being shared on how we are trying to be responsive to this crisis and make the right choices and decisions about how to conduct an evaluation, or in some cases, whether to conduct an evaluation. I think that really enshrines this notion of responsiveness that we've tried to encapsulate here in the principle of accountability. It also means taking responsibility for meeting the evaluation's purpose, for making sure the evaluation is indeed needed and is useful, for exercising due care and diligence throughout that process, and for ensuring redress and recognition as that is appropriate during different phases of the evaluation. And lastly, it's about account giving by ensuring that, you know, reports that are produced are fair, that they're accurate, that findings are well substantiated by sound evidence, that it represents a myriad of views, including those of affected people and community, and that decisions, actions and intentions are also fairly and accurately portrayed in the evaluation products. So I thought it would be helpful if we could just take a few minutes to reflect individually. It's quite difficult to do group work on Zoom, although we would have liked to. But we thought it might be nice if we just take a few minutes to sit down and think about, I think we have got a range of people in this fantastic group with different roles in the evaluation process. So try to think perhaps of any practical actions that you would take or that you do take in your current evaluation work to apply the ethical principle of accountability. Just to give you an idea, one thing that came to my mind was as the Office of Evaluation, making sure that the ethics principles are reflected in our evaluation policy and in all of our evaluation quality assurance tools that we develop. But of course, there are lots of other examples that I'm sure you can come up with. If you'd like to post your ideas on the whiteboard, you just need to go up to the top of your screen and click on View Options, and then Annotate. And Rafaela will put up the whiteboard, and you can quite simply press text and type in there, I think. Otherwise, please also put your examples and thoughts in the chat box. I'd be very pleased to see them there as well, if that's easier. I'm just going to take, I think, maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes maximum for that.
For those of you who are less familiar with Zoom, if you want to write on the whiteboard, I'll just go over it again, and I know some people have joined a little bit late. So to get to the text function, you need to scroll up to your viewing WFP's evaluation screen, green box at the top of your screen. Click to the right of that under View Options. Under View Options, you will see Annotate. Click on Annotate, and then to the left, you'll see a box that says Text. Oh, you've all got it.
Great. Yeah.
Here it comes.
Excellent. Okay, so we've got some really good examples coming up that Rafaela's kindly separating out. So sending updates to the evaluation process to stakeholders, so keeping the communications open and transparent, ensuring consultation and being answerable to feeding back and giving inputs to those that have been consulted, definitely.
Gabby, can I just say, Gabby, sorry, because
Yes.
there's 95 people and there won't be space on the whiteboard, so feel free to use the chat as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great to have so many of you with us. So use the
Make
chat or the
sure the
whiteboard.
pledge is signed. Somebody has read the guidelines, wonderful. And we're going to be speaking to that later. We have a pledge which all evaluation managers and evaluators should sign, definitely. Refer to ethics in contracts, most certainly. How far can we take accountability to communities and people we are serving? Real examples. Or perhaps those in the group do have some examples to share if we have time at the end of the session. Certainly, it's a challenge. Okay, clearly articulating how evidence has informed findings, reporting and being responsive to any divergence in the terms of reference and changes to the evaluation process as they arise, taking responsibility for the quality and the utility of evaluation. Is this evaluation really needed? Is it feasible? Excellent. Okay, got some great ideas here. I can't see any in the chat. Leslie, if there's any, please flag them to me.
No, we've not got any in the chat yet.
Okay, very good.
So those of us who are joining, we're just providing examples of how we think we can be implementing the principle of accountability. Feel free to use the chat function.
Ensure that the briefing covers specific points on confidentiality and other ethical issues, absolutely. So clarify expectations and responsibilities from the outset of the evaluation. Ensuring confidentiality, of course, is crucial. And linked to that, I would just mention, perhaps somebody's put it up here, is data protection. Being responsible for data protection and taking action on any potential or actual breaches in data is a very important aspect of accountability. Wonderful. So we've got some really good suggestions here, Leslie. I think manage expectations. I mean, there are hundreds of things we can do. There's also the issue of ethics review boards and ethics review committees, and deciding when and where those are and should be put in place. And reporting misconduct, as I mentioned, being responsive particularly to issues surrounding abuse or harassment that the teams could come across during evaluations that are not directly related to the evaluation itself, but that is still part of accountability. I think with that, I think we have to wrap up because we're running out of time. There is, if you have any questions or more suggestions, we may have time at the end of the session, I believe, but please do post them in the chat box so that we can be in touch with your questions and hopefully get back to some answers. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Gabby. I can see the creative juices are flowing already. So we're going to move on with no further ado to the principle of respect. It might be one that we think we know very well, but Decca is going to take us through the latest thinking on respect. So Decca, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, and hello again, colleagues. Respect is probably, I want to say, the first ethical principle that was defined in the very first discussion on ethics in research. This discussion was initially initiated in the context of medical research, and you probably might have heard of the Belmont report. Of course, over time, the discussion was expanded to cover all research, including evaluation. In our guidance, we define respect as follows. Respect involves engaging with all stakeholders of an evaluation in a way that honors their dignity, well-being, and personal agency while being responsive to their sex, gender, race, language, country of origin, LGBTQ status, age, background, religion, ethnicity, and ability, as well as their cultural, economic, and physical environments. So this really encapsulates all the dimensions of exclusion that we can think of. Next slide, please. The principle of respect obliges us to ensure that we are providing access of the evaluation to the evaluation process and products for all relevant stakeholders, be they powerless or powerful, with due attention to factors that may impede access, such as sex, gender, race, language, country of origin, LGBTQ status, age, background, religion, ethnicity, and ability. Secondly, the principle obliges that we ensure meaningful engagement and fair treatment of all relevant stakeholders in the evaluation process from design to dissemination, facilitating the engagement of all stakeholders so that they can actively inform the evaluation approach and products rather than being solely a subject of data collection. And thirdly, the principle requires that we ensure fair representation of the different voices and perspectives in evaluation products. Next slide, please. So I also have a short interactive activity for you, but I thought first to share this quotation from our literature review, which perhaps puts into perspective the full weight of the principle if we choose to apply it properly. As Leslie was saying, it may seem straightforward, but then the further you read about it and you try to internalize it, you realize how it's also quite challenging to ensure full application. So I'll leave this for you to read for about 30 seconds before moving on to the exercise. Okay, I think we can move on to then to the exercise. So we start with this scenario that, you know, given the mobility restrictions due to COVID-19, evaluators will not be able to collect face-to-face data collection. However, most of the community beneficiaries of the program that you wish to evaluate do not have access to personal phone and internet. There is significant pressure for the program to be evaluated as the government and donor have to decide about its continuation and want the evaluation to inform this. So a couple of questions for you. We'll do the first one by means of a poll. We are asking, in this scenario, would you decide to proceed? So please choose among the three options, yes, no, and maybe. Raffaele, please put up the results once you have it. Okay, so the majority of us, more than half of the participants said maybe. Perhaps we should get to the second question and then maybe discuss, ask one participant to speak up as to explain the rationale for choosing this option. The second question then is, and I would ask you please use the chat box. We do have a bit of time to get through this question and maybe discuss some of the answers. If your answer was yes or maybe, what mitigation strategies would you use in going forward? So over, start please putting your answers in the chat window. Okay, so the first reply is, says that we should involve a trustworthy and competent intermediary and design a methodology that would give access to community beneficiaries, e.g. the intermediary to organize COVID-safe face-to-face group sessions. And the intermediary should be in the field or local based. Okay. Any other suggestions? Okay, there is a suggestion to use national evaluators to engage the community beneficiaries. There is another reply, if not allowed, is it acceptable to put partners in the field at risk? That's a good point. Find if there are local consultants that can be hired for local consultations. So this has come up also earlier before, but I think the question we should ask and has been put up there is it acceptable to put partners in the field? Okay, again, national evaluators and community leaders, local consultants, and then another option involve community members as data collectors, giving training to them. Look at strategies being used by national partners, says someone, to collect data. Another, Natalia says, if we can't have access to community beneficiaries, either the evaluators directly or by engaging the community members that do not have phone or internet to collect data. Okay. Okay, undertake the evaluation, but be absolutely clear on limitations of data. Very good point. Provided principle of doing no harm is fully respected, we should proceed, okay? I assume, okay. Someone says that do no harm principle applied, smart use of WHO guidelines and protocols on COVID and technology innovative design. Okay, to provoke, somebody says, all the responses applies that evaluators of the scenario are international people. Why do we not think first in the local national experts as evaluators? Okay, find secondary data sources. Okay, so I think we perhaps when initially COVID came up and we had a discussion on this, I think the question that was raised by some of us was, why do we put national consultants also at risk? In many countries, movements within countries were also restricted. And you know, some of these project locations are in remote areas. Anybody have a suggestion in that case? If suppose that movement within the country is also restricted, what are some mitigation strategies we could take? Desk research, okay. If we can't get, another response says, if we can't get national or local experts, it will be important to proceed with duty of care for them and the communities. We could do phone interviews. Okay. I think it was raised, somebody put this reply up, but it's important then to note this exclusion or the groups that were excluded in our reports and explain the significance of their not being engaged, right? Okay, we have a couple of minutes. I would like to ask one of the I think we have heard from the group that said maybe and yes, but maybe it would be good to hear from one person who said no as to why they said no. Anybody, any volunteers?
Are we asking them to speak? So to take
Yes.
off their mic and just speak verbally?
Yes, please.
And maybe you might have changed your mind, so you can come in and tell us that as well after the discussion.
No volunteers?
Hello.
Hello, yes, please.
This is Martina speaking from UNESCO. I think, you know, it's kind of really an ethical dilemma in a way, because, you know, I was one of the colleagues who put the principle of do no harm as a primary principle that needs to be respected. And so I would say we should not put any evaluator, be it a local or international evaluator, at risk. So if the situation does not allow to travel or does not allow to have face-to-face meetings, and those beneficiaries do not have any other access to communication, I think it's really difficult. But on the other hand, you know, not doing the evaluation is also an ethical challenge, because if the decision is taken without the evaluation, so it could also be an ethical dilemma not doing it. So I don't have a solution, but I'm curious of what you would propose, because I'm sure you had lots of those discussions.
Yeah, thank you very much for your input. Yes, I think no easy answers there, but as you said, it's also a dilemma as to if we decide not to proceed, it can itself be an issue, right, with the evaluation. So most of us have been proceeding with the evaluations for various reasons, but within our group, I think we have agreed that, you know, in the interest of also transparency, and by the way, all the principles are interlinked. You will see as we go through the various presentations, you will see that there are clear overlaps and linkages between all the four, right? So we are saying that, you know, if you decide to proceed, I think you should explain in the report the full extent of the group, explain fully why, which groups have been excluded, you know, we could not reach, and how does that affect the overall findings and conclusions reached. So with that, let me hand back to Leslie, and thank you all for your interactions. Over and back to you, Leslie.
Thank you, Decca. That was excellent. I mean, these are conversations, and this is the purpose of what we really want to achieve with these guidelines also, is to see that ethics is part of our everyday practice. There aren't simple answers. We don't just go to ethics when there's a crisis or an emergency or a problem, but these are the everyday thinking around ethics that will really inform ethical, high quality evaluation practice. So it's really good to see everybody thinking, you know, differently. We think differently, which is the whole purpose of coming together to discuss ethics with other people, because ethics are so culturally specific, they're so personally specific, that it's when we exchange like we're doing here that we can find the most ethical, appropriate way forward. So brilliant. Thanks, Decca, for raising all those issues. Now, a particularly exciting part of the guidelines, I hope you will all agree, where we're really pushing the boat out and really taking the UNEG guidelines into 2020, is with this new principle of beneficence, which is really pushing the bar from the traditional do no harm that we're all used to. So I'm really pleased to hand over to Tina to walk us through beneficence.
Thank you, Leslie. So colleagues, the beneficence principle was not part of the 2008 guidelines, but it did come out very strongly when we looked at what comparator organizations are doing. And the basic idea behind here is that evaluation functions have to work towards the realization of human rights, gender equality, and the achievement of the SDGs, and are not somehow neutral. So beneficence means that we strive to do good for people and planet while minimizing harms arising from evaluation as an intervention. And beneficence requires a variety of things. It requires explicit and ongoing consideration of risks and benefits from evaluation processes, products, and longer-term consequences. I'll say that again, from processes, products, and longer-term consequences. It requires maximizing benefits at systemic, organizational, and programmatic levels, and that also includes environmental benefits. And it requires doing no harm, and that is the beneficence, the flip side of beneficence that we know well. So doing no harm and not proceeding where harms cannot be mitigated. So there is a quite useful box in the ethical guidelines that you may want to consult on doing no harm and how that fits into the broader principle of beneficence, and indeed the 4 interlinked principles, as Decker said. And the 4th requirement for beneficence is ensuring that evaluation makes an overall positive contribution to human and natural systems and the mission of the United Nations. So to experience a little bit what we mean by beneficence, I would now like to invite all of you to join breakout groups. And you will have 8 minutes to work in your small groups. You will be working on a scenario, and that is now on the screen. So the scenario is that you are the commissioner of an evaluation that is due to interview children who have been trafficked and have been provided psychosocial support services through your UN program. There is a major donor that is interested in ramping up support to these trafficked children globally, and all of this is pending the evaluation that you're in charge of. Most of the children's parents, however, are a long way away, and many of the children are traumatized from their experience of being trafficked. So now, colleagues, please, in your small group, think about the beneficence principle and think about which elements you would consider when deciding whether to interview these children or not. And please list 2 benefits and 2 risks. So as I said, you will have 8 minutes. You will be randomly assigned to small groups. You don't need to designate a rapporteur. You can just have a free-flowing conversation. And when we all come back, I will just randomly call on some of you to speak about your experience.
Great. And Tina, we can make it 10 minutes because we're doing so well for time.
Okay, great. Excellent. So see you in 10 minutes. All right, so I think pretty much everybody's back in plenary. Colleagues, I'd like to hear from you how easy or difficult it was to work on this scenario. And I'll call on a few of you. Maybe Anne-Sophie from ECLAC, could you take it away?
Yes, I can talk about our discussion that we just had. I think from our side, it was an interesting discussion, but it was easier to come up with risks than with benefits for this particular scenario. Because the risks seem to be fairly obvious. You're dealing with traumatized population, you're dealing with children, and so there's a risk of not having the skills as an evaluator to interview this particular population and to re-traumatize the children. And so that would be the number 1 risk. So you directly go against the do no harm principle. Another risk that we discussed was a legal aspect, because it says that the parents of the children are not present, so the legal guardians are not there who would even consent for them to be interviewed for this evaluation. And on the benefit side, I mean, there's this promise of a major donor that could potentially ramp up their support on the basis of the evaluation, so that could be seen as a benefit. But the causality, I mean, the positive of this program is very hypothetical. and it's not proven. So it seems to be a very shaky ground to use as a benefit to decide to go ahead and conduct those interviews.
Thanks a lot, Anne-Sophie. Anyone else? I can call on you, or you can also speak up if you'd like. Anyone had a different conversation in their group, or was leaning more towards interviewing than what Anne-Sophie just told us?
Hi, Tina. This is Mona.
Hi, Mona.
Yeah, we found in our group it was really interesting to have to make a shift from a do no harm perspective to a beneficence perspective, and I think that's a really kind of radical way in changing how we think. I mean, obviously, do no harm is the backing principle, but some of the I mean, we echo what the other groups talked about, but some of the other benefits that we had thought was it could be, if we were to go ahead with interviewing the children, it could be an opportunity for a sort of peer support mechanism if we're involving, of course, colleagues from the child protection and psychosocial support side. And also the risk of not including the voices of the key people of the program and you know, ensuring that they're respected and that their perspectives are heard and not silencing them, I think, you know, was another issue that had come out. So and there were a few other things that we discussed, but I just wanted to add that on in interest of time. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mona. And could you speak a little bit more about this shift going from do no harm to beneficence, and what maybe some of the tensions were there, or what was discussed in your group?
It was just interesting that we, at the start of the discussion, we were very much focused on the risk side, and sort of assuming that by going in, you know, we'd be at this risk of re-traumatizing them, and it leads to I think a bit more caution maybe in the way that we approach these scenarios, but you know, in terms of the immediate thought when you're presented with a scenario like this is that you could be causing harm and that you want to mitigate that, but not what benefits could come to these groups from being involved and going in and allowing people to share their stories or their experiences with the services that they've received, or you know, any issues that's come up. So yeah, that's how that sort of played out in our discussion.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Mona. I have another volunteer, Roger Smuti. Please share your experience.
All right. Yeah, so I think some of what we discussed has been mentioned also by other colleagues, but in terms of risks, one thing that you have also to think about is potential backlash that their involvement could cause. Remember, trafficking usually involves a criminal syndicate, and so and that syndicate may be even on the ground from where they came from. So there can be some kind of backlash, some repercussions, probably attacks to the family or such. So it's something to think about, the security, you know, aspect. In terms of benefits, we also feel that it is important to get information. So first of all, you must put in place some mechanisms to ensure that children do not suffer as they relive their story. But at the same time, remember, you need to get information so that you can get insight about how trafficking happens. Otherwise, you'll never get insight detailed information about how the criminality is taking place. And so it's still important to consider the potential benefit in terms of information and insight into that kind of criminal activity as you think about involving kids. The rest has been shared by others. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for bringing in that additional angle. Colleagues, thanks for engaging in the small groups and living through this experience of the ongoing consideration of risks and benefits, which really is what beneficence is all about. It's explicitly going through those tensions and that process at every step of the evaluation and thinking about processes, products, and also the longer term consequences, like what you just described. So we hope we can leave you with this, and that going forward, you can continue working in this way on your ongoing projects.
Thank you, Tina. That was great. Where does time go when we're talking about ethics, eh? But that was really good, because I think with beneficence, we are changing our mindset a little bit. You know, we've got so used to starting from the do no harm to looking for the damage, to looking for, you know, how we can harm, that actually sometimes we might think about actually we can do good. And that is, after all, why every one of us gets up in the morning, isn't it? Great, we're going to go into a plenary Q&A. So if you've got questions for our speakers, this is your opportunity. So you're going to be limited, so we don't unfortunately have time for lengthy commentary. So I'll ask everyone to keep their intervention to no more than 30-40 seconds. And ideally it should be a question to our speakers. You can use the chat function, I can compile them, or you can put your blue hand up. So raise your hand in the participants list. To do that, you click on participants at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a list of the participants on your right and a little blue hand that says raise hand. But before we go into that, somebody did ask whether they'll have access to this wealth of data that you've been putting in chat and on the whiteboard. So as you know, because you gave your permission, I think, when you came in, this has been recorded. The link will be shared on the UNEG website, I've been informed. So it will be available to all UNEG members. But I know we have a lot of people who are not in UNEG who have joined us, which is very exciting. We have non-evaluators, we have auditors here, we have people from all different parts. So if you would like to be sent the link with the recording, could you please put it into the chat? So either if you can put it in the public chat, or if you'd rather not, you could just put it to me, Leslie Groves Williams, and I will compile your email address. Right, we have 10 minutes for questions. So let's go for it. Waiting for a hand to go up. And if it's a question for a particular speaker, just say who it is that you're asking, or the principal. If you can't remember the name, just the principal. And we've also got Gabrielle Berman, who's our in-house quality assurance expert, who can take more overarching questions. And it can be questions on process or content, or even questions of clarification.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this is Judith from the ICC here. Just a question on mainstreaming these guidelines in organizations. So I'm sure that each one of our organizations already have an, you know, one or several ethical guidelines. We certainly do as a court. And so I was wondering if you gave some thought, and I apologize, I didn't read the report, your draft guidelines yet, so maybe my question is in there, my answer is in there. How do you envisage these guidelines to be mainstreamed in organizational ethical guidelines, or have you given it some thought how to do that? Yeah, that's my question. Thanks.
Anybody want to give that a response? I think Gabby might be the best placed for that one.
Yeah, perhaps I can start, and then maybe Tina wants to come in.
And Gab would also like to come in after you,
Gab,
Gabby.
yes, okay,
Yeah.
great. I mean, the thinking behind these guidelines, and I think this was perhaps one of the biggest challenges for us in developing them, was to have something that's meaningful and useful, but that can be applied and adapted by a whole range of organizations with very different mandates in the UN system. So in terms of mainstreaming, it's very true. A lot of organizations do have their own specific ethical guidelines, and many of them are built on 2008 guidelines that we have updated. But it is our hope that these will be useful to shape and inform agency-specific guidelines or guidance. So we're hoping to, let's say, have set the bar. I think particularly with the principle of beneficence, which is definitely a step in a new direction. So we want to set the bar, and then hopefully these can be taken on board by individual organisations and then fleshed out and put into something that's very specific to that organisation's mandate and the context in which they conduct and commission evaluations. I don't know, Gab, Tina, if you want to add to that.
Thanks, Gabby. Gab, I know was waiting.
Just in terms of, this is actually something that we're currently doing now, and I actually was waiting to update the UNICEF guidelines, UNICEF procedure. I was waiting for the UNEG guidelines, and I think, you know, some of the ways that it's shaped it is some of the principles that have been added to in the UNICEF one. We're looking to, and again, this is still in process, so we're looking to add things like integrity to the current guidelines, which were kind of very, very research focused around some of the principles. We're also making sure that the key aspects of the guidelines are reflected in our own documents. So, you know, the areas that they cover, whether it's humanitarian or prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, those types of issues are necessarily also reflected in our ethics guidelines. And in that way, we're just ensuring that there is consistency. We still have the same kind of framework that we used to have, but just that all the kind of core principles and procedures that are reflected in the guidelines are necessarily also represented in the UNICEF procedure. Tina?
Yes, I just wanted to let colleagues know about what else is in the guidelines in addition to the principles that we looked at today in more detail. And in fact, the guidelines have a whole section on implementing the principles. And so the way it is presented is that it's broken down by actor. So there are guidelines for entity leadership, guidelines for those who organize evaluations, and guidelines for those who conduct evaluations, with more practical pointers as to how to implement these principles in practice. And something else that I think Gabby mentioned in the accountability session is the pledge that is found in Annex 1 of the document. And that is a detachable one-pager that you can sign, you as UN staff, and you can also have your consultants and external evaluators that work with you sign. And it's a pledge to adhere to the principles and work in an ethical fashion on the evaluation that you're currently on. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So I've got two questions. I've got an accountability question for Gabby and an integrity question for Simon. So for Simon, it's a question around, I mean, it's also an accountability question also, but it's from Chandi. Is there any way of assessing the ethical makeup of a potential candidate for undertaking an evaluation? Is there a test to check the individual's understanding of ethics? So I'm going to give that to you, Simon, and Gabby, I'll give you yours now to save time. So you've got one from Anna. Are there systems to follow up on breaches to the ethical principles? Will there be consequences? A blacklist? We see how in our humanitarian system, people move from one position to another without consequences. Sometimes they even get promoted. So I'll give Simon that first and then hand over to you, Gabby. And then we might have time for one or two questions. So keep them coming in chat.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Chandi, for the question. Just to repeat again, Chandi was asking, is there any way of assessing the ethical makeup of a candidate for undertaking an evaluation? Now, I'm not sure if the integrity perspective is the only one to answer that question. I think probably all the principles would apply to a certain extent, but at least from an integrity perspective, I could say that integrity, as we discussed earlier, is also this part of, to be able to have integrity, there is this aspect of professionalism, making sure that somebody even brings the right competence, commitment, practice, knowledge, and expertise to be able to have that ethical behavior in evaluation. Meaning, Somebody doesn't only need the technical expertise for an area, but also knowledge about ethical guidelines and evaluation, how to put that in practice and so on. And as Tina also just said, one important aspect with these ethical guidelines is that they do not only contain the principles, but also, first of all, guidelines, and at the end of the document, also checklists to go through that can help a bit to a certain extent assess whether the ethical guidelines are put into practice. And for example, for those, there's one checklist for those who organize evaluations, which directly starts with the first question that comes from the integrity background. Do those who are to carry out the evaluation have the required qualification, expertise, and experience to competently conduct the evaluation, including awareness and knowledge of ethical guidelines? So at the end, that's still for you, of course, to assess, but at least the guidelines try to give a bit assistance in that regard.
Excellent, thank you, Simon. And like you say, they're all interlinked, and each of our authors could respond from their perspective. Right, over to you, Gabby, on the accountability question of how is it that we promote people who don't demonstrate ethical behaviour? But no, the more specific question of what can we do about breaches?
Thank you, Anna, for that provocative question. I still think we would like to keep it in the confines of evaluation, yeah, and not the whole humanitarian system. But I think, you know, the principle of accountability is indeed calling for each organisation, or in our case, Office of Evaluation, to put in place systems to ensure ethical standards are applied in evaluations, and that there are indeed consequences if that doesn't happen. So it is up to each organisation, Office of Evaluation, and I think most organisations do have systems in place to address these issues. I think the bigger question is whether they're used properly or used appropriately. I think most UN agencies, we certainly have an ethics office in WFP, and within our Office of Evaluation, we certainly have channels to report ethical issues that occur within the evaluation or outside. So I think it's a question, when it comes to accountability, of A, making sure that those systems are indeed in place in your individual organisation, and B, making sure that the expectations regarding people's or evaluators or evaluation managers' behaviour is made very clear. And that the channel for reporting ethical issues or breaches, often it's not quite so clear cut, are well established and clearly communicated. In some organisations, and in our office in particular, we are considering having an ethics committee type of body within the Office of Evaluation. In other systems, it's actually built into the existing quality assurance mechanisms. So I haven't answered your question fully, but I do think it's about that. It's also about, just to touch on your point about people moving around and getting contracts, even if they haven't done a good job and so forth. I think there are two things here that are linked to the accountability and some of the other principles. One is to have clear discussions on conflict of interest and competency and qualifications, which Simon mentioned earlier. I think that's really very important, that takes place at the outset before people are even hired. And the second, and this is something we're struggling a little bit with in WFP, is to have a very clear system in place to assess performance of external contractors, and in our case, evaluators. Because it has to be done in a transparent and objective way. And if that's not the case, then it's quite difficult to take action if there are issues that come up regarding ethics or other things. I hope that's helpful. Again, there's no clear answer, but I think it's a good start to the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Gabby. Well, unfortunately, it's a start to a discussion, and it's also a close to a discussion, because we're coming to the end of our session. I'm being asked if there's a training module available that demonstrates the way the principles are applied as well as abused that evaluation officers can use. I'm not aware of a training module. Any quick answer from any of you?
May I come in?
Yes, Simon.
With a quick answer. First of all, this is also the launch of the 2020 ethical guidelines. So they may hopefully serve as some kind of training, especially with these elements of the principles, the guidelines, and the checklists. We also have still discussions in the working group to what extent there is further guidance helpful moving forward. But we said, okay, let's first make sure that these guidelines actually go out and are being put in practice, and then get some reactions from people, what is useful, what can be improved, and so on, in terms of further developing further guidance. And I think what we also tried to show with this session today is that ultimately ethics is also a lot about, that not everything can be perfectly defined and set up in advance, but that things need to be discussed and thought through and exchanged. And these guidelines also have very clearly invitations to have these discussions in our evaluation units, to have them with colleagues, and to wrap our hand around ethical dilemmas that we face. And I guess that is also training for us every day to think through these aspects. And then let's see if there's any other form of guidance that we can come up in the future.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully you've got colleagues that you can talk to and learn as you go along. We're all learning with ethics. And none of us saw much of what we've had to deal with this year. So we're all learning. What I'd like you to do in close, we will finish on time, is I'd like you in the chat, last piece of work for you, is what learning, ideas, maybe even light bulb moment are you taking away from this session? And that's part of our accountability, which is very important. So what learning ideas, maybe even light bulb moment, are you taking away from this session? I certainly had a really big light bulb moment from hearing you. So thank you for that. So if you can please pop them in, it'll be really helpful for us to get that sense. And just give you a minute to do that. And then Gabby, while people are typing, maybe you can do a formal close, and we will finish on time. Maybe do that now because it's 29 minutes past. And it's part of our integrity to finish on time.
Very good. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you very much, Leslie. I just want to say thank you to so many people who have taken the time to join this session. As Simon mentioned, this is just the beginning. The 2020 guidelines are brand new. I think they have never been more needed than now. It's clear the context that we're operating in with COVID, with myriad other disasters and complex situations. Business as usual is definitely no longer an option for any of us. So I think the timing couldn't be better to launch these guidelines. We're going to take this work forward now as the UNEG working group. We had some initial ideas, but we've decided that the priority should be now to continue building on today's session, to disseminate the guidelines and build awareness around them and create space for discussion and reflection on these principles and related issues. We're also going to be a little later on, perhaps in the first half of next year, trying to get a sense of how useful the guidelines are, how they're being used by our colleagues, and then what might be other needs that are emerging as a result, be it more detailed guidance or training. So we will have our ears to the ground and we'll be in touch with many of you. As co-convener of the working group, I'm always interested and available to stay connected to you on this really important topic. So thank you again for being with us today.
Wonderful, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. We'll save it. Don't worry. Have a great rest of your day.